I think it was only when I moved to the US when I decided to pursue my master's to do an MBA. I think the narrative was more of my own that I could decide what I want to do, and that's where I met my husband in grad school. I got married, had a baby, and pretty much settled into the suburban American, the Indian American dream. And it was at that point, I think we were deciding to move back to India, and we were not really too sure of the reality of it, because I hadn't lived in India as somebody in my 20s. I moved to the US early 20s, where until then I was in a very protected environment here in India. So, and it was that time when we said, okay, let's do this big vacation, and then we'll make a decision then what to do with it. And we decided to pick Kauai, one of the islands in Hawaii that we thought we'll just do something fun. We weren't really sure we were going to do any activities, but it was just somewhere really far away, the farthest we've ever been. So Kauai was one of these, it's one of the northernmost islands in Hawaii, and it was just a chance mentioned by one of our friends about this Nepali sea coast, and there was this kayaking trip, and the coast that we wanted to kayak was a weather-worn sea cliffs, and there were sea caves, and some of these sea caves were large enough to hold multi-storied buildings. So that was a 17-mile section or 30-kilometer section that we wanted to kayak. And I've done a little bit of kayaking, but regular river kayaking, and sea kayaking is a completely different ball game altogether. So we were up, we were ready at 5, and we came down at reported at 6 o'clock in the morning, and the water looked calm enough. And apparently the previous day it was cancelled because the tides were too high. So I guess secretly in my mind I was hoping it would be cancelled again, but clearly it wasn't. And so we were there, and that was it. And so we go into our kayaks, and I was sitting in the front, which is the bow of the kayak, and my husband was sitting at the back, which is also called the stern. And so we had our paddles all ready, and so we were just, so we go into the sea, and it was about 1 mile in, and the guide looks at us and says, okay, this is it. If you all want to turn back now, this is the time. Otherwise, you all need to be committed through the way. And I'm like, okay, 1 mile down, how hard can it be? And the water looked relatively calm. So, but I was like, and I remember my husband and I looked at each other, and he's like, okay, we're good to go. And I was like, okay, let's do it. And it wasn't going bad the first couple of miles, honestly. And then we were probably down 5 miles. And then it just suddenly, everything changed. I remember the waves were probably 20-foot high waves, which at that point from where I was looked like it was 100-foot waves. And it was overcast, and everything was just, there was water everywhere, and we were these tiny people on this kayak. And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? And just then it happened. The boat capsized, and we lost our paddles. I mean, we were struggling how to get back onto the boat, and there was just water everywhere, and the sea salt, and it was one of those mad things. You're like, pretty much this is it. And the guide was probably half a mile away, and all you could see were these huge cliffs. And the coast is somewhere, but I mean, it's close enough, but too far away at that moment. And we managed to get back onto the boat somehow, and we got these, and we both had our paddles on. And I think it was at that point we were nearing these caves, sort of the sea caves, as I mentioned earlier. They were called cenotes, which are nothing but sea caves formed by the sea, and some of them large enough to, like I said, these multi-storied buildings, or you could have a small stadium in them, and some of them were caved in. At one point it felt like you were the last survivors on the planet or something like that. I was completely sunburnt, even with a hat. I just couldn't paddle any further. I remember my arms were just completely giving in, and my muscles were sore. It was just mental note in my head that I was going to divorce my husband when we get back to the coast. But so I'm not too sure how we made it. It was just a mental game at that point. Halfway through, you are neither here and you can't turn back really. The only way forward is to go forward. Somehow we reached the coast and managed to pull our kayaks, and I'm not even sure how I actually made it even to the car that day. Exhausted completely, slept fantastically, and it was just the next day, the immensity of the ordeal, that it was just one of those amazing experiences you go through that it wasn't an immediate epiphany for sure. It's only when you reflect back on it, pretty much even after 7 years, for me it's one of the best experiences of my life. And I look back, and then it's taught me so much about me as a person, and things that always guides me when I'm in some sort of a crisis that I feel that I don't know how to move forward, and I think of that day.